Well, hello and welcome. We're coming up on National Safe Boating Week, which is always the last week in May. And so I'm going to start a little series of videos here on knots. And basically this beginning part is just called What's My Line? And you have different types of line. And if you're on land and you're holding the piece, it's called rope. If it's stored in a locker on a boat, it's called rope. But once you pull it out to do something with it, it's called line. And you have anything from synthetic line, which is brightly colored, strong, and then you have some of your dock lines. And these have a little bit of elasticity to them and whatnot. Advantage of this is it floats. So this is what you're going to tie your throwable life jackets to. I'll cover that later. And those things are not seat cushions. Those are actually throwable lifesavers. And then with your other dock line, we're going to cover some basics on how knots work. So essentially, the friction between two pieces of the line is what will cause the knot to hold. And the more you convolute line, bend it, twist it, whatever, what eventually happens is you continually weaken the strength of the basic line. And the first knot we'll go into on the next video is going to be the anchor bend. But that is like one of the least stressful knots. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you some basic parts of a knot. So for example, if you take this piece of line and you bend it. All right, now this Chapman's pilot thing, he will call that a bite. Okay, well, when you have a say a bend in the line or a bite, you have an upward twist. See the friction point, or you have a downward twist. And where this comes into play is which way you're feeding the line from when you tie the knot. This will be especially important when you get down to the bowline, but we're not going to get to that right now. Another part of the line that comes into play is basically if you have a bend, which is a bite, and you go around something, it now becomes a turn. And then likewise, if you go all the way around and come back the way you started, that's called a round turn. And likewise, you can do a double round turn. And that again, that double round turn is going to be the basis for your anchor bend. Simple knots, well, you do have the overhand knot. And you basically make your bite and just thread the line through. This is called a stopper knot. So if you go through like the base of a cleat, that'll stop your line from falling in the water. So if you just bought a nice section of line and no one did that, and next thing you know, you're looking, where's that $150 section of line I got? It's in the water. And then if the hole's a little larger, then you're going to do another type of stopper knot. Which is just the figure 8 knot. And all that does is tie a larger stopper knot. Now, let's say I have a piece of line over here and I need to attach to something. And I'm not going to be there for very long, so I don't want to waste a lot of time going into a really involved knot. And I got another piece of line here. However, I don't want to tie them up for very long. So a very simple thing you can do is you can tie an overhand knot with one piece. And then you notice how I put the other line through that overhand knot. And then over here, I'm going to tie another overhand knot. So then when I pull these two lines, two overhand knots kind of bunch together, and that's pretty strong. And then when you're like, okay, I'm done with this, I want to break it apart. All you got to do is slide the line apart. You pull one end out and boom, you're done. You're out of there. So you're not committed. And as we know, as I said before, every time you bend and twist a line to tie a knot, it's very stressful. Anybody that's married knows that tying the knot can be very stressful. And likewise, sometimes you just want to be able to slip the knot off and get out of there. So those are the basics of your knot tying. Like I said, you're going to have a bend or a bite, upward or downward turn. You're going to do a turn if there's something inside of this, like a stanchion or whatever. If you go completely around, it's a round turn. And if you do that twice, you got a double round turn. You got the basics of some knots started right there. The only thing I'll cover today is when you're out on the dock, please don't drop your line like that. You can either take your line and you can kind of make a little zigzag pattern, or you can coil it. So when you zigzag it, that's called faking it. It's not with an F, it's with a PH. And then when you Fleming it, you make a nice little coil right there in your dock. So what you're doing is you're getting rid of tripping hazards, because we want to be safe whenever we're boating. And it also allows the line to be exposed to the air and the sun and dry out. Unlike this line, the more it's exposed to the sun, the more it's going to break. It's going to get withered and die, so to speak, like plants. So now you've kind of covered some basic friction points on a knot, and you know how to do an overhand knot and a figure 8 knot. I recommend you kind of get familiar with these terms. The bend, the bite, the up-hand turn, the downward turn, and kind of get familiar with all that good stuff, plus about making a round turn and double round turn. And next session we will cover the anchor bend.